Welcome to Sports from the Couch.
I gotta say, it's the stupidest thing in sports.
With your host, Mike Mercado.
Players cannot stand him. Coaches cannot stand him. Most importantly, the fans can't stand him.
Brought to you by Mercado Airwaves.
I'm gonna say it once, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it's a disaster waiting to happen.
That is so bad, that is absolutely brutal.
Hello and welcome in, friends, to another edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your day. And it is a special edition of Sports from the Couch as we step into the octagon for UFC 264. Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3. It is going to be a wonderful night at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada this Saturday night. And we need to talk about this monumental main event. But before we get to all that, let's take care of some housekeeping notes. You guys can follow us all over the universe. We're on Twitter at Mike M Media. I'm on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media, and you could be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Be interactive with the entire network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Like, rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you get your favorite podcasts on all major podcast platforms at Mercado Airwaves. You can see the video version of the podcast on youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Make sure you guys hit that bell and give us a thumbs up while you're subscribing to us. And we're on Roku at the Rewind Sports 60 channel. We are teaming up with Jerry Riles and the amazing people over there, doing some fun stuff locally and nationally when it comes to sports over at the Roku channel, the Rewind Sports 60. Of course, you could support the network on patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. We have swag at teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. All right, guys, let's get right into it. I just wanted to jump on in this edition of Sports from the Couch and talk about this huge main event at UFC 264. Now, if you're new to us, for example, if you're new to us over on the Roku channel over at the Rewind Sports 60, or if the algorithm, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or on YouTube at Mercado Airwaves Network, first of all, welcome in. But if you're new to us, we have actually done here on the network a bunch of interviews with UFC champions, Hall of Famers, legends, and great stars. And we're talking about like Max Holloway. We're talking about Robert Whittaker. We're talking about Cowboy Cerrone. We're talking about Kamaru Usman, so on. And I mean, Mackenzie Dern has been on the show. The Hadi Karate. We've had it all. Like we've had Michelle Watterson has been on the show. Like we have had some dope people on the show. And you know what? I'll look it up right now for you guys just to give you an idea of how much we are ingrained in the MMA community, because it is, first of all, it's really fun that we get a chance to talk about this here on the new edition of Sports from the Couch, because for the longest time, we were doing UFC stuff when it was just the Mercado Airwaves. And it's nice that we're able to introduce kind of our past and how we got to Sports from the Couch. And I'm actually looking at it right now. We have it over on the network. So, I mean, Kelvin Gastelum has been on the show. Chris Weidman has been on the show. Michelle Watterson. We've interviewed Showtime Pettis. Jessica Ai has been on the show. We've had Kamaru Usman. We've talked to Henry Cejudo. We've talked to Chad Mendes, so on and so forth. So definitely Dominic Cruz has been on the show. Frank Mir has been on the show. I've been really blessed and lucky, and I'm really proud of those moments. And to introduce you to anybody who's new to us because of the expansion of the show, check that out. And you can see why I would want to talk about this fight in particular, because there's so much interesting stuff around it. Not just like the drama, but a lot of stuff that's within the business side and the octagon side of this. You know, so for anybody who doesn't know, and they only tune in for Conor fights, obviously you've seen the first and the second one. First one, Conor wins. That was in the middle of his rise to fame when all the magic was there, the Mystic Mac. And then the second one is when Dustin really was taking a stranglehold in the lightweight division, especially with Khabib being retired and out of the picture. So with all that, though, neither one of these guys has the title. And quite frankly, Dustin, to a lot of people, is the uncrowned champion of the lightweight division. And while all that was going on, all these negotiations, all these back and forth things on Twitter, you had Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler have impressive wins, climb the rankings, impressive debuts in Michael Chandler's case, and fight for a title in a crazy fight. And Charles Oliveira is now your champion. But there's this weird thing hanging around the lightweight division. And Dana doesn't help it. The UFC doesn't help it. I get it. Because the guy that's shadowing, that's looming over it is Khabib. And like, while he may be retired, he's still young. There's still that elusive number of 30-0. Like, there's the rematch with Conor, if it made sense. GSP, another fight with Dustin. Like, you get why they want to make it. But all this is looming while there's an actual champion and an uncrowned champion. And Conor is hanging around. There are so many fascinating things going on in the lightweight division. And the fact that now we're at this moment where, with all that circumstances, you have Dana White, and he all but basically said, this is a number one contenders fight. So even if Dustin went through that entire murderer's row, was dominating, arguably the second best lightweight when Khabib is there, the best lightweight when Khabib is not, can lose the third fight in this rubber match and end up giving up his title fight to Conor so that Conor can end up going against Charles Oliveira. Like, it's crazy what this fight can bring about and how they have both just set themselves up. Like, okay, after the fight with Dustin, and you had Conor, and, before we even get further, I'm not a Conor basher. I'm not necessarily a Conor lover, but I get it. And I think he's great for the sport. And I think he's kind of, this is going to be crazy to say, his skill is a little underrated. Yeah, I said it. He's not underrated, but his skill is a little underrated. So you have these two killers, right? They're going against each other, and Conor wasn't in a title feud. Conor wasn't looking, other than the rivalry he had with Khabib, he didn't deserve a championship fight. Not that he's not a championship fighter. He was not the guy that was in line to be champion or to get that opportunity. But because he put himself in a position and Khabib was there, he was always in talks, right? So now there's a real champion. There was a real championship fight. And like us, the insiders, we talk about it. But it's all about this one. It's all about this one, because if Conor wins, he's in the title fight. If Dustin wins, he is one win away from fulfilling it all. The destiny of the diamond and the comeback story of the guy who had so many struggles coming to finally win that championship. So many fascinating storylines. Before we even really start breaking it down, this trilogy and this final match in this trilogy, maybe so many ramifications. So many. So with that, it's kind of like any other sport, any other conversation we have here. There's obviously X's and O's. There's interesting things to talk about. Like, we could talk about whether or not Dustin is going to try to wrestle Conor down, kind of try to neutralize what Conor does with the counter and the unorthodox kind of way he goes at it, if that's what Conor's going to try to do to counter what he did in the first fight. Or the second fight, excuse me. We could talk about calf kicks. We could talk about how that might affect one or the other guy, especially if Dustin is doing that to Conor, and how that affects him switching up or allows him to be stationary. But if you're looking for that, highly suggest Morning Combat. It is with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. Amazing insiders for both MMA and boxing. They're on Showtime and on YouTube and on CBS Sports. Check them out for the X's and O's. They'll give you wonderful detail and wonderful conversation. But for me, I kind of want to talk about the stuff that's going around. And not the rumors, not the gossip, not the drama, like the actual tangible stuff that we need to talk about. For example, in a typical trilogy of fights, right? The winner of number 2 usually wins number 3, and according to an amount of time given, right? Like between the two fights. This one's unique in this stance. The fight between 1 and 2 was a big gap. And for Conor, it was a historic one. Something we may never see again. Dustin, in the meanwhile, between 1 and 2, went through murderer's row, earned every ounce of respect, fought every dude, was in battles, in wars, while Conor was living the Conor life that we ended up seeing throughout that time. The Khabib rivalry, the whiskey, the investigations, the criminal stuff. And that's not throwing any shade at him. All that is going on. All these storylines are going on between 1 and 2. So then we get to fight number 2, and there were moments where Conor looked good. There were moments where I thought Dustin was going to get down and we were going to see the magic. Back-to-back wins for Conor, first Cowboy, and now the guy in Dustin Poirier. I almost fell into it. But Dustin, strong chin, stronger punch, and made history. Made his claim on the top of the mountain. Could have been crowned lightweight champion that night. A lot of stuff happened between 1 and 2. Then you look at 2 to 3. Not a lot of time. Not a lot of changes, except for one thing, and we'll kind of get to that in a little bit. But it's going to be interesting. Because if Conor can figure a thing or two out and have a little bit of that magic that he seems to just kind of possess, that second fight could go a totally different direction. We might not even get in the third one. And if he does something in this third one, like we said, the reward would be crazy. But for Dustin, he's playing with the house money. He's got the second win. He's got the most decisive win. He's unanimously the guy. So while there's a lot of pressure on him, if he takes care of business, if he doesn't get crazy, if he just handles he's on to Sizzler. We making that money. And that was the risk he was willing to make to taking this chance at fight number 3. While the belt is the prestige and it solidifies your Hall of Fame career, the money you make from this fight, and if you are the guy that beats Conor McGregor back-to-back times, you take the trilogy, you win this fight, and go on to eventually even beat Charles Oliveira and become the lightweight champion, man, it might be worth the risk. It might be worth the risk for taking this fight instead of a title fight. And it being the third fight in this trilogy after coming off the second one with the win, a knockout win, I can see why Dustin can win this fight and why a lot of people, if you are looking beyond just the one punch knockout power and magic of McGregor, that is something you gotta admit, and we have to keep it down the middle. So that Dustin won the second fight. Did a lot of good things in that fight, and there's a shorter time between it. Another thing I wanted to kind of get into, and I mentioned it, the big difference between 1 and 2 to fight 2 and 3. So in the first fight, and it was a big storyline in the second fight, Conor got in the head of Dustin. Period, because Dustin submitted it. And it threw him off his game, and it just rattled him. So then we get to this point, right? For fight number 2, where they're all brotherly love. They're hugging it out, talking about charities, talking about whiskeys, foundations, all this stuff. And we saw this Conor kind of with the cowboy fights and maybe trying to turn a new leaf and whatnot. And, it didn't work out for him in the Dustin fight. Then we get to part 3, and this stuff is nasty again. We're recording this before the press conference. But we're seeing it with the DMs. We're seeing it with the Twitter. We saw it with the beef right after the fight. Like, it started to get heated again. What I think is interesting about this, and you guys let me know, if you're a Conor hater or a Conor lover, let me know what you guys think about this as we psychoanalyze it here on Sports from the Couch on Mercado Airwaves with your host, Mike Mercado. Thank you guys for joining us as we get ready for UFC 264, Poirier versus McGregor 3 on youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network and on Roku, the Rewind Sports 60. So if you have Conor talking this trash now, I don't think, and I may be crazy, let me know what you guys think. I don't think he's doing this to get under Dustin's skin. If he does, it's a plus. He'll take it. But I think this is to get himself psyched up. I think this is to get Conor in the right place. We talk about the distractions and what Conor was doing while Dustin was making his run, trying to climb up the rankings. It's like Conor is a goal-oriented person. He always has been. And we've always seen him with the checklist to try to get things done, what he wants done. And in this moment, he talking trash, and if he pulls out the win, it creates this brand new run for him, where if he chooses his fights correctly, and that includes a title fight, everything that was off the table before that Dustin loss is back on. So you see him starting to create the narratives, the winding road to certain goals that he might have. And it's fascinating, the difference between the two dudes that fought in the second fight to the two dudes that are fighting this Saturday. And I wonder how much of it is Conor being Conor, just trying to bring back the old school magic. How much of it is a ploy to get under Dustin's skin, or if it's just to get him and his brand in a right place. And this is never going to get as ugly as what happened between him and Khabib. So we know it's not going to get to that level. But I also don't think it's been fun, right? Like, we're not having fun. This isn't what happened with Jose Aldo or what was going. This is not even like the Mayweather thing when it was at its peak. This is kind of okay. And I think a lot of it is because most of us believe Dustin winning the second fight, the momentum goes that way, right? Quote unquote. But again, it's Conor. That's the caveat of all this. It's Conor. Can never count him out when it comes to that. But keep an eye on that. As we get closer to Saturday night, just the trash talking. And he's starting to do media. That's another crazy thing. Conor hasn't done a lot of media. He just now started doing what the Brett Okamotos and the Ariel Helwanis and whatnot. Like, he just now started doing his obligated mandatory media stuff, but he hasn't been going around. And I think that's probably had a little bit. Maybe that's to try to get under Dustin's skin. I'm not going to get you PR. I'm not going to get you money. Again, look at me overthinking it. So it's working on me. It's interesting. It's interesting to see how that plays out. So what happens for Dustin if he wins this fight? Obviously, a number one contendership. He goes on and fights Charles Oliveira for the lightweight championship. But more than that, I mean, he gets a claim on 2 straight victories over Conor McGregor. He gets to claim that he's beaten Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker. Like, he's gone down to the entire murderer's row. And if he gets that championship, besides Khabib, and then the thing for Khabib will always be, as time goes on, while he was undefeated, if Dustin is able to add a few more names to it, he might get to be able to claim the best of his class of all time. And I know in MMA, especially recently, we've been having a lot of those. But it's true. I mean, what's the counter? And the comeback to see how he's just gone level by level by level. And it also shows that he gambled on himself and he won. That he was willing to go get that big time fight money because he knew he could win it. Then go on and try to win the championship. I mean, you got to give it to Dustin. That's a heck of a way of doing it. And it's a heck of a way on betting on yourself. And if anybody can do it, can go to a live crowd like that and fight the dragon straight on, it's Dustin. But what if Conor wins? He beats Dustin, gets the third fight, wins 2 of 3 of this trilogy, and he goes on to fight Charles Oliveira for the lightweight championship. Like, we talk about madness. We talk about crazy pandemonium. We talk about the circus in town and anything is on the table. Anything is on the table if Conor wins this fight. And that's what makes this fight fascinating. It's a little, it kind of takes me back a little bit that it's not as mainstream as I thought it would be. But the idea, like, we've already talked about how crazy it would be for Dustin to win and what that can mean for the landscape. But if Conor all of a sudden is your number one contender and is going to headline a show that he is the challenger for a championship, oh my God. And let's then get started about bringing Khabib back. Let's start talking about a Pacquiao fight. Let's start talking about him going up to welterweight to fight Kamaru. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that are on the table all of a sudden if Conor pulls out this win. And I think we can all agree on this one, right? This isn't going to decision. Somebody's getting knocked out or going to sleep in this fight. So that alone, that result is going to propel one of these two dudes to a title fight and into another run, another point of their career, another chapter that we may have never seen before. And like, think about some of the greats as veterans, like a Randy Couture, right? Or Michael Bisping, GSP, go on and on, of guys who've won titles later on in their careers. I mean, for Conor or Dustin to do that after what they've been through. And of course, we mentioned it, but the final boss for both of these guys, if they somehow, because you don't sleep on Charles Oliveira, can't do it. But somehow they get through that, either one of these dudes after this fight, Khabib. And I know he's retired. I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm sick of Dana talking about it. But if you get to a point where one of these two guys is your champion, undisputed lightweight champion of the world, GSP and or Khabib Nurmagomedov, makes things really interesting. It makes things really interesting. I want to know what you guys think, though. I know that for the MMA community, everybody loves Dustin. They root for him. And I know for the MMA community, Conor's polarizing. For a lot of people, they appreciate what he brings to the game. Some people don't. For a lot of people, they think he's the greatest. Some people think he's overrated. I personally think not only is he perfectly rated, I'll tell you this much. Come in close and listen. Skill-wise, Conor's underrated. Not as a fighter, not as a champion. Perfectly rated. But people doubt his skill. And I think that's why for people in the MMA community, the people who chatter, the people who are joining us here on Sports from the Couch on Mercado Airwaves, welcome on in, friends. That's what makes this fight exciting. It's not a gimmick. Conor can do something. Conor can beat Dustin. Conor can mess up the entire lightweight division. Just as much as Dustin can claim his stake if he wins this fight. That's why this fight is so interesting. So I want to know from all you guys, what do you think is going to end up happening at UFC 264? Now, we will make our official predictions over on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk, and at Mike M Media, I will make my official predictions, and of course, who I'm putting a little bit of allowance on at DraftKings, or if you do it on FanDuel or wherever you get yours, go ahead and I don't claim to be an expert, but if you got a dollar or two, we talk about it over there, and I will make my official predictions. But I want to know yours down in the comments section below. But with that, guys, that'll do it for us on this edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. This weekend is going to be a fun one at UFC 264 as Dustin Poirier takes on Conor McGregor in their third matchup. The winner gets a number one contendership, all but guaranteed, against Charles Oliveira for the lightweight championship. I am super excited for this Saturday night. It's got a hell of a card too. I mean, we're talking about Wonder Boy and Gilbert Burns. Oh man, this is gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good card, and we'll make our official predictions on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram Mike Mercado Media, and of course at Couch Sports Talk. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. See the video version of the podcast on YouTube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Make sure you subscribe to us, hit the like button, and of course that little bell. And on Facebook.com/Mercado Airwaves. We're also on the Roku. That's right, a Roku channel known as the Rewind Sports 60. The one and only Jerry Riles, Chicago sports legend, has started up that channel with a bunch of great young talent. So you guys check it out over on Roku, the Rewind Sports 60. Make sure you guys subscribe to us, like, rate, review, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts at Mercado Airwaves. We have a pop culture podcast, The Good Brothers. We have a life podcast, the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. We have a sister podcast, the Gone Missing podcast, where they spotlight missing people who did not get mainstream attention. And of course, Sports from the Couch and our interviews with athletes and celebrities, wherever you get your favorite podcasts on all major podcast platforms at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube. But while you're there, go to patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves Network, where we have exclusive content, and you can support us over there at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves and at teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy all the games. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And enjoy UFC 264. You've been listening to Sports from the Couch on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm Mike Mercado.